In the spirit of a lot of the activists that have come before us, in Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, who did what they had to do to defend their community, we've invited some attorneys and activists who are trans and queer people of color to come talk about what's at stake if trans, intersex, and gender nonconforming people have to go to the police station and have to be by themselves. What are they facing that cis people are not facing there? How are our Know Your Rights trainings that we do complicated if we're talking about a trans individual? So I think it's going to be a really great panel. We have people with a lot of experiences to share. I also want to thank my great team who has helped put this together. Khadijah in the back, and Jackie and Shaqueta, who are bringing in all the food and the drinks, and they are some of the hardest working people at First Defense Legal Aid, and some of their work goes under, isn't always recognized, so I really wanted to recognize them. If you're an attorney and need CLE credit, you're gonna see Jackie in the coral shirt. When she comes in, you can see her after for that. And I hope you are all able to stay around. We have lots of food and beer and wine and soda and lots of other things here for you. And we really, this is about knowing your rights, but this is also about a call to action for attorneys and law students who have the ability to go represent people at the police station. Attorneys and law students are the only ones allowed in the back of the police station when someone is under arrest. That means they are the only ones that can be back there and advocate, only ones besides the police officer and the state's attorney office. So it's a really important job, and we really hope that some of the attorneys and law students today will really understand why it's so important for you to step up and make sure that people are not alone with the police. All right, so first we have a performance by a really awesome person named Vita, and she is going to do some poetry for us.
Thanks, y'all. Can y'all hear me if I don't use the microphone? For the recording? Okay. All right, got you. I'll use the mic. Cool. After Lynette Riemann, Trans Day of. A, visibility. Visible as in that one time I got clocked on a train station platform, my red lipstick bouncing off my beard, sore thumb style. The look on this man's face making my identity and his disgust with me obvious, and I am visible? Visible as the ones before me bearing my skin shade, body shape, and body count. I exist in this way. Heartbeats placed in between conversations with my sisters about why I don't yet possess a pistol for protection. In these moments, I wish I weren't B. Vaporization. A synonym for the word erased. Hidden deep in binaries that will remove me from dialogue if I was ever included, as if my gender were only present for one measly annual occurrence. When booking flights, sitting at bars with stubble in tow, I fade into masculinity as easily as my dead name. A name I am forced to dismiss as anything other than trauma. Trauma that will not be recognized when leaving a breathing body, begging the question if a they, them dies from their hands or someone else's, will they still call me he, C? Vices. As in a bottle for every memory, as in why haven't you deleted those text messages yet, as in running of metal into skin at high speed to create the only scars society will accept. A sign that the true difficulty of living in a world you'd rather not because you're too chicken shit to swallow or slit the truth, skin splits and persist with pulses that won't quit, so you figure, fuck it, I'll just drink this, and in between the buzz of a shot or a split is a memory or a few of them that you just can't forget, so hazy becomes habit. Just like the times you wondered why you couldn't stop. D, vengeance. A spit trail for every officer. Blue lines of blue lies warrant saliva stroke smiles as proof that I don't fuck with you. Drums and sweat beads pound the streets as black trans voices split the sky. It's not about the bathroom. It's not about the PP. We doing this for TT. We doing this for Kiki. City streets now know our scent hunters for liberation, seekers of reparation, and a huge fuck you to this fake-ass nation. Put it in writing. I'll wait, because I know I have to. Because what's vengeance for those who go home at night holding privilege like tokens? Camera flashing false credibility. We're all in this together. They scream from hushed mouths when it is time to correct pronouns. Hell. As long as white skin paints a body, I can only assume apathy until proven otherwise. It is human nature for these people to know comfort and safety as interchangeable. What a nice world that must be. Villainy. Burn it all down. Thank you.
All right, that was really powerful. And so I want to invite the panelists that are ready to come up. And I also wanted to make sure that everyone was able to look over that sheet of definitions. It's as it says at the top, it's a very introductory. Every trans person has their own narrative and may look at that and say, no, this is not how I feel. It's just kind of a general understanding because there are going to be terms coming up in this panel that some people may not understand and are here to learn about. But I really think that it's important to stick to specifically what's at stake for trans people and not defining those terms here. So please come up. And this is Maria, our lovely moderator. So if you just want to have first.
Thanks, Christina, and hello, everyone. I'm Maria Hernandez with Black Lives Matter and First Defense Legal Aid. Today, throughout this panel, we're going to go over the Chicago Police Department's directives regarding interactions with trans, intersex, and gender nonconforming individuals. They do have a policy. It's about 2 years old. It lays out the process they're actually supposed to follow in the streets, in the squad car, in the jailhouse, when they're dealing with folks so that they can comply with the human rights and the Constitution and everything. Of course, we all know that they do not always follow this process. Some of what we don't know is specifically what it looks like in reality when people are in these encounters. So we've pulled together this panel of folks who have experience from many different angles on what this looks like in real life. We know that people are being harmed in many ways, and hopefully today we can get some clarity and start a conversation around that so that we can figure out how to move forward, especially with our Know Your Rights training and with this advocacy in general. So first of all, I'd like to just pass the mic to the panelists to introduce themselves. Just your name, pronouns, organizational affiliations, and just what connects you to this issue. So I guess we can start. Who wants to start?
I guess I can start. Can y'all hear me? Okay, I gotta bring it close to me. This is too natural. My name is Lasaya Wade. I go by she and they pronouns. I am also a collective member of BTGNC as well as Trans Liberation Collective here in Chicago. I am the director and founder of Brave Space Alliance, which is the only Black trans-led organization here in Chicago. This connects me in multitudes of ways, not only as a woman, Black woman, trans woman, gender nonconforming person, so yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Simone Williams. I currently work for Raise the Floor as a lobbyist, but I am a former staff attorney with First Defense Legal Aid, and I'm connected to this work because I'm a Black queer woman, and also I'm an attorney, and I feel like it's my duty to represent everybody, and because I'm queer, I really want to protect my people. So, yeah, that's why I'm here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fade. I work with FDLA as a Know Your Rights trainer. I'm a native of Chicago, from the South Side. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am non-binary femme. And I'm connected to this work based upon my experiences, just living in this world and growing up here, but also based upon my dreams and aspirations to create a new world for me and those that I love and care about, and just people in general to be freely themselves without having to worry about, doing too much, because there's a lot happening out there.
Thank you. Great. So I guess just to get right into it, I'd like to start today with the first point of contact that a person has with the police, wherever it may happen. At First Defense Legal Aid in our Know Your Rights trainings, we teach people that the maximum amount of information you need to give to the police is your name, date of birth, address, and perhaps the phone number of a parent if you're a minor. Now, that's the maximum. It doesn't mean that you have to give. You have the right to remain silent. And a lot of our work is around, helping people to protect that right and avoid false confessions. Now, the thing is, with your name and date of birth, and your address and your parent's phone number, that may seem very straightforward for most people, but for trans individuals, it gets complicated in a number of ways. The first one we're going to talk about is the name. Because oftentimes they're going by what they find, either what you say or what they find on your ID if you give it to them. So, my first question for the panelists, and particularly for you, is if you know anything about the process of getting the gender and name on your ID to match that with which you identify it legally. And that's, I'd like to get a legal opinion from Simone, and then also just opinions from people with experience, either with this or with people they know.
Okay. So first I'll start with what the police are supposed to do. And in the order that everybody can find online, you can just Google it, and it's also in FDLA's volunteer manual. The whole order's in there, and it explains what the police have to do. If you want to be called by your name, no matter what's on your ID, you can ask the police officers to call you by that name, and they are supposed to call you by that name. If your ID matches the name that you go by currently, then they have to call you that name. I don't know necessarily what happens in the police station, but you can always document if the police are refusing to call you by the name that you want to be called by. And documentation would mean getting the officer's name and their badge number, and if you don't have that, the least you can do is get a clear description of what that police officer looked like and the shift that the police officer was working, so that you can identify them later if any other abuses happen.
Great, thank you. And now, the process of getting your name changed, though. Okay, so in the directives, they do say that they have to respect your gender pronoun and your chosen name, but then they go into a whole separate process of how they classify your gender in terms of how they're actually going to treat you. Not what they say, but what they do, where they put you and how. And so this is pretty heavy stuff, and all of that starts out with your ID, and then with a physical evaluation of your body, which is terribly invasive, and we'll get into that in a moment. But just out of curiosity, does anyone on the panel have any thoughts on the process of getting your name legally changed on your ID?
I know Tommy's coming, he's on his way.
So
he does that work.
He does that work.
He does that work, yes.
Okay.
What structure are you asking that question in?
Yeah.
What kind of thought process?
Well, more like the bureaucratic side. The bureaucratic side of actually having to get the government from, whether it's the State Department or wherever, to acknowledge that you are who you are can be very difficult. And so, yeah, we'll wait for our final panelists. Yeah.
I can talk about me going through the process.
Please do. I would love to hear.
I won't tell y'all my previous name, that's none of your business. But I will tell you the process for me. It was very difficult for me when I changed my name a few years ago. I'm not gonna tell you my age either, that's none of your business as well. When I started my name change process, it was difficult due to the fact that I had to have a parent in the room to get my name changed in Tennessee, and then I had to fight my father in getting my name changed because he didn't want me to change my name. So I had to go through a whole lawsuit of like, why do I need my name changed and what reasons I need my name changed, and I had, it's very weird because my parents are still together, right? My mother was on my side, my daddy was on the opposite side, and it was just a back and forth continuous fight for a few months for me. So it was at the end of it, it was like they took my side. I was able to change it. They asked the process, are you running from someone? Blase, blase, blah, as I always do. Are you running from creditors? I wish I could because I owe so many people. But it doesn't change my social, right? It was a process for me. I know it has changed over the years for different trans people, and especially it depends on the state that you're in. But in Tennessee, it's a very difficult process. And there's ways that you can find loopholes without having your parents in the room. But for me, I was young, a baby trans person, and I didn't know the process, so I'm running to my parents like, I need someone there, I need somebody to be behind me, and then, my father got caught wind of it, and then it was a whole nother deal. So in that process for me, it was going from 4 to 6 months to get my name changed, and going from an easy process of $250 to a process of $6,000 through the court costs and court fees. So it's different for every person, and then it's different in each state. And yeah, that was my process.
Wow, yeah, so yeah, that's a lot. And so there are a lot of people who don't, who don't have the privilege of having an ID that matches their identity. And so should they choose to go with the CPD policy to make sure that those police officers use their chosen name and their chosen pronoun, that does go beyond just saying nothing. It involves a conversation. And I would ask, and this is for you again, what are the risks and complications for giving a name that will be marked as an alias? And what could that lead to, especially, whether or not you've been in custody before, and how would this complicate actually for the lawyers to actually find the trans person while they're in custody?
Okay, so we always want to advise, don't lie to the police. It's better to say nothing than to lie. If you are calling an organization like FDLA to come and represent you at the police station and you give an alias, we can run into complications, because if your loved ones don't know your alias that you gave, then that's going to lead to us having problems locating you at a police station. So you never want to lie in that case. If your loved ones know your alias, and the attorneys normally ask, oh, are they using an alias? Then we'll be able to locate you like we'd be able to locate anybody else. It's really up to you. You should do whatever you need to do to feel safe, but if you can avoid lying, you should.
Thank you. If I may ask, have any of the panelists have any experience either with themselves or their friends being arrested? And any idea of how people might be managing this differently?
I'll just say, speaking for myself only and alone, is that when I don't make contact with the police. When the police make contact with me against my will, which is all the time, I am not trying to have my gender affirmed by the police, right? That's the last thing on my mind. I'm saying anything to get up out of the jam. Like I don't care what level of normativity I have to perform. I just want what's happening to end. So like, if they want me to go by my government name or, because the more and more questions that they have, they start to treat you like a specimen. So and I didn't have on too much of anything except for some lipstick one day, and I got pulled over, and it went from, it seemed like you cut somebody off to like them basically asking me all these questions when they should just watch, drag race. Like they could just watch it themselves. They have nothing, there's nothing to do with me. But this was their time because they have this power, right, to stop me as a person, right? As I'm living my life to ask me all these questions, the only thing I'm thinking in my head is, how the hell do I get this to stop right here and now? So I'm just like, I like to play around. I'm just saying anything, and so that's my response initially, like from my perspective as far as like navigating that, because yeah.
Thank you.
So every trans person is different and they maneuver differently. And I hate to put it, but every trans person looks different. And perform their trans is different. So for me, years ago, I had, I constantly get pulled over because I drive fast. It is what it is. I'm lucky enough sometimes to get out of them. But the 3 times I directly got in contact with police officers that I was arrested, the first time was before I started transitioning. I was young, I was 16, I was crying, and I didn't say anything. I just froze up. Next thing you know, my mother came and got me. I was out of the situation, blah, blah, blah. The second time when they caught me, I was already on record. I was in an action and, thinking I was Superwoman in this particular time. He tried to put a handcuff on me. I did a Wonder Woman spin. I remember that moment to today. I did a Wonder Woman spin. I got the handcuff off, but the next thing you know, they come in numbers. They're like roaches. You can't never get rid of them. The other one bounced out and then, got handcuffs on. In that particular moment, I had to hit a realization like, oh shit, I'm trans. And I'm about to go into a space where I don't know if I'm going to get in this space and not come out. This was in Tennessee, so it's completely different from what Chicago jail's house looks like. You're dealing with racism, then you're dealing with homophobia, and then you're dealing with transphobia on a collision of all at one time. So in this moment when I went to jail, I froze again. It's just like, oh shit. I'm gonna have to deal with this. So for me, it was just like, here's my ID, leave me the fuck alone, do what you got to do. I made my one phone call, Superwoman came out the way, my mother got me out within 24 hours like she always do. In that particular moment for me, it was a realization that me putting myself and my body online like I've always been doing in activism world, that I will always have to worry about my safety, not only with my community in all aspects, but with the community that is supposed to protect and serve us, right? I am a big-bodied black trans woman. Automatically big-bodied black people, period, get attacked for being quote unquote what we call dangerous or seen as a threat. So me holding them to spaces was just like, okay, shit, do I just be quiet? Should I just go ahead and just do what they say? And then I started, being a little deeper into activism, started learning my logistics around laws, and I don't have to say shit. And I don't even have to put the window down. Can I search your car? No, I need a warrant kind of motion. So I started learning these things and aspects. I'm like, okay, I can talk shit. So what can I do to make you mad? Does you just want to leave me the fuck alone? So yeah, in that particular process, it's just a realization that my transness might look different from their transness, and they can perform differently than I can. Just like previously Faye just said, that they can perceive themselves themselves into a cis normativity when they are maneuvering in that particular space. Me, I cannot do that. They're gonna have someone search my body, number one, and then they're going to put me in a position that I will have to be in this jail with cis men, and I will have to fight for my life again, right? So it's a constant traumatic experience that with my performance, I hate saying that, but with my performance of who I am, it's a constant movement.
Thank you. Okay, so we had another panelist come. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Han Misha. I'm from Transformative Justice Law Project. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as a trans person. For me, that means I was assigned female at birth, and my gender identity is more masculine. I apologize for being late. I was stuck in traffic, not my doing. I completely agree and second everything that has already been said. There is also that part, right, where law enforcement tends to profile trans people. And for example, now suppose if I get stopped, now if there was this, if some Indian police officer, if they check my name, they'll be like, oh, this is a female name, and because I never changed my name. So Tanvi, immediately like that would out me. So there are those issues, and one also has to consider that like my name is what my name is, and that's how I identify. What my legal name would be, like that is for booking purposes, and that comes later in the stage. So when in terms of interactions with law enforcement, there are many times where there is no legal requirement to provide legal name, and whatever my name is, that's how I should be affirmed.
Thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up because we did have a question for you before you got here. If you could just share a little bit of the, well, I guess we kind of, Lasiah went into a lot of it, just the legal process of changing your name on ID.
Absolutely. So, in Illinois, to change one's name, one can only change change their name legally through the court process. Illinois is not a common law state, so the only way to do that is through the courts. TJLP, we run a monthly name change clinic, and that's on the last Friday of every month. It's a free walk-in clinic at the Daily Center, 9 to 3 p.m. The way you would go about doing it, it's a full case. One would file a petition, get a court date. There would be, you are required to do publication in a local newspaper for 3 consecutive weeks, and after that, you get a court date. You go in front of the judge, and you have a hearing, and if you meet the statutory requirements, then the judge would grant your name change, and that's how one would obtain a legal name change. And now that is for adult, that's the adult process. Now for minor name changes, the standard is a little different. It's called the best interest standard, and either both the parents have to be consenting of the name change, or there has to one has to meet specific publication requirements and giving notice to the parent who is not present. So that's the process for minor name changes. And yeah, if anyone needs assistance, they can contact us, or they can just walk into the free clinic on the last Friday of every month at the Daily Center.
That's a beautiful resource to have. So I guess my final question on this subject of IDs is, considering all the barriers that come from trying to get your name changed, and the fact that even if you do, it's a process, Should folks think about whether or not they want to carry an ID on them on a daily basis when it's not legally required? You don't, it's like the myth of like driving with the light on. It's not illegal, neither is walking around without an ID. So, but is that something that, and this is for everyone, that folks should consider?
Repeat that for me one more time. Hit the road down.
Should folks think about, just different thoughts. Should folks think about whether or not they want to carry an ID on them on a regular basis if it doesn't match their gender identity? And if everyone in their life knows what their alias is?
This has so many intersections to it, right? So many intersections. Like, why do black men have to have IDs on them, right? Why do black people have to even stop to be searched? Right? So that is like so many intersections within itself. No, sometimes it's my that damn thing is heavy. I don't have to walk down the street all the time with that, but I will be literally, and then on top of it, it's hot outside. I don't want to put my ID in my, no, it's too much sweat down there too. So dealing with all that, it's just like, why do I have to carry ID on me? Knowing I need to get to A to B. And knowing you can easily pull me up in your system if I know my ID number, or even my alias or my name, right? Me personally, you can Google me. So I shouldn't have to, right? I understand the structure of why you need it on you, just in case you have to go buy alcohol and this, that, and the other. That's cute or whatever. I already have that stuff at my house. But I should not have to carry it on me. It's, you know what, it's stupid, but it's real in its concept. Common sense ain't common for everybody, right? And when we deal with certain things, like common sense blew straight out the water with this law, like, come through. That's all.
I'll just say something really quick. You should do whatever makes you feel the safest. So if it's safer for you to carry an ID than not, then then carry an ID. But otherwise, you don't have to.
Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, just a little bit recanting what I was saying earlier about, like, I keep mine on me, not just for driving purposes, because like the police always see themselves as like pseudo parents to people, you know, it's like pseudo guardians, and so like they want your hall pass, and if you don't have your hall pass, it's like a whole elaborate process, and like I just like it's difficult, at least for me, to like even just like sit through that and just deal with that, and you know what comes next in regards to maintaining like my energy, what I'm going to be depressed after, what I'm going to be agitated even further, what is going to escalate. So if they can look at whatever type of whatever and I have less to say, then like I'm hoping that helps. But it's I don't know, it could be challenging based upon like just how much I have on, like what I'm serving, like, you know, what if there's a wig up here, and then like the beard's still around. So once again, as Lasai put out earlier, now you're a conundrum, and now you have to be searched, and now you have to, there's an extra, now you're a specimen again. So for me, in my life, I carried on me because even before I became more aware and open and taking ownership of my gender identity, just being black, and especially being assigned male at birth, but particularly just being black, just knowing that everyone has this process of dealing with us in the society from the standpoint of control of us, you know. So I just always think to myself that I have to have my hall pass when I leave. Like that's what I think of, and that's I carry it with me, and that's what I do.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And trans people know how to keep themselves safe and how to navigate this world. So in terms of people should do what makes them feel right, what makes them feel safe. There is also other implications of having ID or not having ID on you. For example, as of right now, the way the CPD policy stands, it's called General Order G020103. If, for example, someone does not have their ID on them, then in terms of gender classification and how their placement would be, it would be based on their genitalia. Otherwise, if they do have a state ID, if they do have a valid government ID, then whatever the marker is listed on the ID, that would be considered for classification purposes. So, and mind well, like that is the policy. That, not to say that that actually always happens or doesn't happen, but that's the stated policy. Obviously, law enforcement should affirm, and basically, trans people know what to say and what to do. So whatever gender they identify with, they will inform. And yeah, that's that. And gender, like, yeah, that's not even a matter. Yeah.
Word. Okay, so in our imaginary interaction, we've just run into a police officer. Somehow, whatever you've decided you want to do, you've given them your name, date of birth, and if you have an address, if you have a phone number, you may or may not have given that info. We train people to say at that point, am I free to go? Because you don't always know the exact moment at which you are actually under arrest, and you can also be detained and not arrested. Either way, the moment you're not free to go is when all those rights kick in, like the right to remain silent and stuff. So we train people to just ask directly and then leave. Now sometimes what they do is they have these little Terry stops. They want to pat you down before they let you go to make sure that you're not carrying an AR-15 in your tights or something. I have no idea what they think is going on with the stop and frisk stuff, but so the next thing we train is, to say, I do not consent to a search. And you have to say it, because they're going to assume, but whether you say it or not, they might do it. So I guess my next question is, if they're still going to search you, why do you bother to tell them not to? And that's for you.
You always want to say, I don't consent to a search, because that's one of the reasons why a search could be valid. If you say, oh yeah, you can go ahead and search me, or if you don't say anything at all, and later they find something on you, and you're in front of a judge, if the judge finds, oh, this would have been a dirty search, but you gave them permission, then whatever they find on you, they can keep and they can use against you later. So you always want to say, I don't consent to a search. And you want to make sure everybody around you can hear that, so that if they need to be called in as witnesses in court, then you have some validation saying, oh, I didn't consent to this search. And we're thinking the Know Your Rights training for FDLA is not for your protection on the street necessarily, it's for your protection later. So it can seem counterintuitive to say, oh, I don't consent to a search, but they're gonna search me anyway, because you're preparing for later. You're building a case. So you have to think about it that way instead of thinking, oh, they're gonna stop what they're doing right now, because that's not gonna happen.
Thank you. And so now that we're on the question of being searched, this is very complicated for trans people. For instance, in the directive on how they're supposed to deal with any gender nonconforming folks, you have the right to have someone of the same gender search you. They can't search you on the street just to determine gender. And as Tanvi said, determining your gender does, at some point, for them, come down to either your ID or your genitalia. But they can't search you to find out what your genitalia is. So I mean, the question for me, because I really don't know, how are they, if anyone has experience, do they ask? What do they do? Like, what are your, show me your, how do they determine genital, you know what, let me just go over what the directive actually says before I ask this question. So to determine someone's gender, they have to, let me just pull it up. It's right here. Okay. Okay. So the exception to ID is if you, so if your ID doesn't match your gender, but you're post-operative, whatever they consider to be post-operative, then male to female will be processed as female, and female to male will be processed as male. And by processing, that's where you're gonna, who you're gonna travel with and all that stuff. In the event that a government ID is not available, then they're going to look at your genitalia and say whether your genitals seem to be male or female. Yes, okay, and so here's why I'm wondering, this is where it becomes very fuzzy, like what are they actually doing to make this kind of determination? And if they don't know, if they can't tell, for whatever reason they feel entitled to, then they call in a supervisor who uses processes that aren't very clearly defined in the directives to make that determination. So I'm just curious if anyone from a legal or personal perspective has any experience with how they actually determine your gender for processing, beyond just talking to you.
I can say it from experience. I'm going from experience to the whole 9 yards, right? Like I previously stated, the second time that I was arrested, I had to go through a whole process, blase. Okay. Who knows the word terminology tuck? Okay, we good? Who don't? Tuck. Okay, yes, please Google it. I'm not going to go through that whole process right now. So I was really, good informed and tucked in this particular case that the person that came in and searched me, the woman that came in and searched me, could not tell that I did not have bottom surgery. But I was still placed in the women's holding system, and it was a relieving for me because I can hear the men screaming and hollering, so I didn't know what was going on. So mentally, I was just like all messed up. Like, please, I can't do it. I cannot fuck with that right now. And that would have thrown me to a whole nother loop. So in that particular moment, I was safe, but with my homegirl that was with me wasn't. And it was lucky enough that we were close enough that she did not tell them that I was. But in that particular time, she was stronger than I was to go in them particular spaces. So she went to the male facilities while I went to the female facilities during that particular action when people was being arrested. But when we left and when my mother came and got us out, you could tell that her whole mental state was screwed. Like she was just completely out of it for the next few months. Like she was afraid to even talk to a police officer or even go into particular spaces where she knew police officers were going to be in, to avoid that again, because now she is listed in the system as male. So anytime she gets arrested, she's going straight to the male side, right? So in that particular state, it was just like that I had the privilege enough to go in the female side where I would know from the future events that I would go to that side when I know she won't. So in the experience, it was just all fucked up for me.
Does anyone else have?
I've had the experience of they'll just search you anyway because they say looking for stuff, but they touch your genitalia. Like that's a part of that. Like even TSA, I did not agree to go through the total recall machine where they like scan your whole body with the X-ray thing. I didn't trust that, right? And so, like, as a result, they started popping their lips and making it clear that they're angry at me for not consenting and going through a machine I knew nothing about. And when they searched me, they squeezed my genitalia in such a way in which they were bruised, like they were sore and hurting. And like, I need to get where I was going to, and I didn't even have time or the agency or the support to address like the type of traumatic harm I just went through. And I just, when I was hearing the question, I was hearing you discuss your experiences and even what it means to like, in one instance, be disadvantaged based upon perception, and then when the next instance, because you pass in whatever way, like it's interesting, and it's all based upon the person who's like perceiving as well, right? Each person gets to be like the new parent, and they have their own parenting style, right? And just knowing that they're going to apply their hands to your body because they have a right to, and whatever type of like fucked up thoughts are in their head, preconceived notions are in their head, are going to be enforced, because even a lot of this language is extremely binary, right? I identify as non-binary femme. So looking for a gender, they're gonna say, are you man or woman? And I'm like, I'm none of those things in your consciousness in this language that you speak. I am not this. I am not within the colonial construct of gender as you know it. I'm not that. And so here I am trying to give it this, and I just want to go home in this moment. And they're going to send somebody, right, who has power, who has a gun that can hurt me, whether they have no matter what type of body part that person has, to touch my body part, and then designate me like I'm in the hen house or something. You go down that chute, and that person goes down that chute. And so, like, I don't kid myself in those moments. I'm just like, if it's going to happen anyway, that's what's, like, I don't know what the path of least resistance is, and I don't know if they're going to accept my dissertation on gender in that instance, and yeah, so.
I feel like the question itself is little misplaced and invalidating because, as you said, this policy, the way it is drafted, it is very binary, and we are completely ignoring the reality of the non-binary community and the fact that the non-binary community is the majority, and like when we talk about the transgender community. So that's number one. Number two, Chicago is in the process of implementing the Chicago Municipal ID, which would, I believe by end of 2017, the city is planning on issuing municipal IDs to basically, it would be open to all the residents of Chicago's, irrespective of immigration status. It would have a lot of, right now, a lot of people have difficulties getting IDs because of the strict documentation requirements. And so this ID would accept various different forms of identification, and that would allow more marginalized communities to obtain official ID. Now, this ID would also affirm transgender community by allowing self-designation of gender marker. We won't be policed by the state and the medical industrial complex in terms of our gender, and we are also advocating for non-binary marker options. So in terms of how search would happen and what happens right now the stated policy is that whatever, if suppose you do have a valid form of ID on your body, then whatever is stated on your ID, whatever marker, that's the marker that the law enforcement is supposed to follow. And then now it does get murky in the process because as one goes further through the arrest process in terms of searching and classification and housing, there is a lot of gray area, and there is a significant issue of trans people being held in solitary confinement, or also called protective custody, for their own safety. And there is nothing safe about solitary confinement. That's the most ridiculous notion out there. And there is the other issue of trans women being placed in men's cells. So that is utter physical, sexual, emotional abuse that trans people have to suffer through. And frankly, this is a very simple matter. Trans people know who they feel comfortable and who should serve. If, first of all, no one should be searching your body, and that kind of agency, no one should have it. But if it has to happen, if a search has to occur, then the person will inform, like, whatever the person is comfortable with, whatever gender. That should be the answer.
Thank you. And speaking of some of the differences in the arrest processes, one of the most fundamental differences for trans individuals is Well, actually, I'm just going to go over the gender breakdown of where you can be, where you can actually be held in Chicago. There are more facilities for men than women. So already there are, if you are a woman, there are a few places to go. For trans folks, there's only one place in the city where you can be like fully processed and held, and that's Central. And so trans folks are transported much more often or more frequently than regular people, because unless you're arrested right in First District, you're going to have to be. The way the directives line it out, they might take you to another place to start your processing and then take you to Central, where once again you may be reevaluated physically to, for instance, it could be a situation where someone like Lisaya, who had tucked priorly, and got through the first one, now you get reevaluated. So I don't know if that is, and we lack data right now, and that's another one of the reasons why we want to continue this outreach, let people know to call 1-800-LAW-REP4, and when you get our hotline, let us know that the person is trans and might need extra assistance to deal with that, so that we can get the data to understand, at these different junctions, where people are falling through the cracks. But, so I was wondering if anyone, especially the lawyers, has any thoughts on the extra transport and things like that trans folks might have to go through. They do have the right to have an officer of the same gender with them, but I'm not sure what that looks like either.
So I think we have to start from, our starting point has to be the acknowledgement that the way the policy is currently, the way it exists right now, it simply just does not protect trans people. It does not do what it is supposed to do. And so we already have existing issues and problems with the policy that need to be fixed for there to be even proper data that trans people we are already being discriminated right now. So the data is that we are starting from a place of discrimination. So we at least have to come to that point first, is that we will stop discriminating against you, and then collect the data in terms of now where we are actually not following the policy the way it's currently stated. Now, you are absolutely right. Yes, central detention is that's the place where all the booking and housing of trans people happens, and that is extremely problematic, and that's an understatement. There should be no reason why trans people should be segregated. We are humans, just like everyone. No one likes prisons and jails, and nor do we in terms of how, as we all know, these places, they are not really free places. You don't have freedom, and everyone's freedom is curtailed. So there is no reason trans people's freedom should be double curtailed. That doesn't even make sense. But that's what's currently happening. And in terms of transport, that's an absolute problem, because that is putting trans people and trans women at risk, because now now there is additional time just to even process you, other than regular people. Pardon. And cis folks are being whatever area they get arrested, that's the area where their booking happens. But in terms of trans community, trans people are sent to central booking, and then if they are released on I-bond, then in the middle of the night, they are traveling back by themselves, and possibly without much funds or resources, and that again puts them at risk of being attacked and harassed, and the cycle of abuse and violence continuing. So it's a problem. It's a problem that exists right now, and that just needs to be fixed, and that needs to stop happening, basically.
So I agree with everything Tanvi just said, but I just want to give you just a timeline on what happens after an arrest. So if you are arrested in a certain area, they're going to take you to that police station first, then they'll search you there, then you'll be transported over to Central, and Central is just like right down the street is District 1. So I think with you just saying that, it highlights the fact that you are trans, so it lets everybody know, well, this person's trans because we got to transport them to Central. And that is problematic. They'll also search you again at Central. I don't know why that's in the statute. Like, that's not necessary at all, but they will search you again. And again, you always want to document anything that the police are doing. So you want to document who the officer was that searched you again, and you want to stress that you want to be called by the name you want to be called, and you want to be addressed by the gender that you are. So if anything happens outside of that, then you need to document at that point. It's not a time to fight at that point because there's not much you can do, but you're preparing again for a case later.
And just to note, the policy as it currently stands, though it does not address, though it's not the way it should be and does not address everything, it is the current policy of CPD to use pronouns as requested by trans, intersex, and gender non-conforming individuals. So just to keep note.
Thank you. Yeah, the directives say a lot of really interesting things. I think especially considering what you just brought up about being searched again when you get to Central, having to do that. The directives do say that trans and gender nonconforming people should not have to be searched more or searched more in depth. And so definitely, you know, recording everything, getting people plugged in with FDLA who's working on this issue and other people working on this issue can help us really demonstrate whether or not that's actually something they're complying with. They might be searching people more. One thing that stood out to me within the directives is, so, you know, when you get arrested, you know, whatever your gender is, when you get arrested, they will take your, you know, cosmetics off, they'll take your wig or whatever. And the trans directive, they say that cosmetics and prosthetics, you know, your wigs, your weaves, your lashes, I think they leave the weave in. I'm not sure if they always leave the weave in. That trans folks will be treated just like cis folks when it comes to confiscating those things. So which already is, I'm sure, like a traumatic experience, have them take your, you know, they're undressing you, changing your gender performance according to, because they say it's not part of your body or whatever. But what really interests me is the word prosthetics being in that directive. So I searched their directives. They don't have a policy that I have found yet, and I would like, if someone does know it, for what they do with the prosthetics of cis people. I don't know that they're taking people's extra legs. I don't know that that is something that's happening. But in regards to trans and gender nonconforming people, the only prosthetics I can think they could be talking about is genital prosthetics. Now, the process of full surgical transition is very expensive, prohibitively expensive. There are programs to help people, you know, with financial planning and loans and stuff, such as the Northside Federal Credit Union. You know, they do counseling and have a package just specifically for that, and other places too. But it's very difficult. So my question is, does anyone have any thoughts on, just some thoughts on that, of having your genital prosthetics taken because they say it's extra, because they say it's cosmetic?
Once again, first of all, the whole issue about prosthetics, or whether or not gender-related surgery, how expensive it is, like, absolutely, that is a parallel and a very present issue of gender-affirming surgeries not being fully covered by insurance, how how cost prohibitive they are, but that's a separate issue. like there is each trans person is different, and like so there is no one reality where one is having surgery or one should have some surgery. Like there is no one transgender surgery, so that's a myth, and yeah. Not everyone can afford it, and neither do folks. Not everyone wants it either, and that's none of anyone's business other than the person's. So, having said that, yes, we completely agree with you. It is problematic, and I don't believe they take cis women's bras. They don't confiscate cis women from wearing bras, and so they should. There is no reason why they would confiscate bras belonging to trans women, but that does happen, and so yes.
If you want to.
She's passed, but I want to speak on her narrative. The girl that I went to jail with, they took her wig, her bra, and her underwear. And they took her shirt because they said it was showing too much. But it was like, that's why I said when I seen her after, her whole attitude completely changed. It was just like she was stripped of who she was, and she had to find that person again after. Yeah, that's all I can say. It's like, I seen it myself, and to see the process after, it's just a realization that you are not human when you have a number.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. Thank you for sharing insights into that. So I want to kind of change lanes just slightly. And talk about within the trans community, a special community that is particularly at risk, which is the youth. Within all of our communities, the youth are at very high risk. So when you're arrested as a minor in Chicago, you are supposed to have a youth officer present while you're being interrogated. And since you called 1-800-LAW-REP4 and you've been to a Know Your Rights training, you're not saying anything in this interrogation anyway. But there has to be a youth officer present. And if you are picked up for, well, okay, so a minor cannot be convicted of prostitution. You can't be charged with prostitution. That is human trafficking, and you would be the victim of it. So there is a separate task force for human trafficking. Now, unfortunately, one thing that's specifically shouted out in the directives is that the police won't assume that because of your gender identity or presentation that you're committing any particular crime, and they say especially prostitution. I don't know why that's the one crime they thought of for this directive, but that's the only one they name. So there are, it is a thing that trans youth face is being questioned for, whether they are or are not involved in human trafficking. They may find themselves, for whatever reason, facing the human trafficking task force, which is similar to the youth officers in that when they come in to question you or to be there for your interrogation, they don't necessarily present as, because of their title and their role, they present as folks who are there to kind of like help you. You're a kid. We don't want to hurt you. You can't be charged with prostitution. Now, what they don't necessarily, I don't know if they tell you this or not, but you can be charged with anything else, though. They pick you up for prostitution. Okay, you won't go to jail for that. But if you have drugs on you, any crimes that you committed, I don't know how someone who's being human trafficked, you can assume that their free will is there to commit these, whatever. You can still be charged with any crimes they find out about during this questioning process. So one thing I want to ask is, like, is there, like, how does In the process of obtaining a confession, how does it change things to have a special team like the youth officer or a human trafficking officer there with you, especially when it comes to people talking, making that choice to talk or not to talk while they're in police custody? And are there extra risks for trans youth?
So, yes, the youth officer has to be there. Yes, the human trafficking official or whoever they are, they have to be there too. But they all work for the same department, so they're not your friend. They're not trying to get you out sooner. They're not trying to get you home. They are doing their job. So you have to do your job and save yourself and not say anything. And if you do call, you should call FDLA or have a loved one call FDLA so you have an attorney there as well. But it's on you, because you're the person that is holding the remote. You're the person that's in control, not the department. So it's important for you to always be silent, no matter what other person's like, oh, we just want to know what happened. They're doing their job. So at the end of the day, it's about getting their job done, and it's really important for you to remain silent.
So the listing of prostitution as like that would not be evidence. Well, that is one more example of discrimination that trans people face, and specifically trans women of color, where it is a pretty known. It's a pretty known issue, and that we are struggling with, where law enforcement would, for profiling purposes, when they see a trans person, would often pick them up and accuse them of prostitution. And so that is definitely an issue, and so there had to be a policy telling law enforcement that no, you are not supposed to profile trans people, and trans people are, just by their very existence, does not indicate prostitution. And there is the other, it would only be the criminalization of sex work issue. That itself is problematic, where that agency over one's body, that is none of state's business, and so yeah, that itself is problematic.
Thank you. And considering that in the past, as recently as last year, Chicago Police Department officers have been found trafficking children. There was a young girl last year. There have been other cases in the past. I would like to ask, what if there's a particular risk for trans youth who might not have the visibility or the support networks to advocate for them? Not that any child who's being trafficked necessarily has the most resources, but considering that trans folks so often get pushed into the shadows and to the sidelines, extra risks for them not being in a situation where they're being questioned by police officers who knows what they'll actually do to you without a lawyer present.
I would just, sorry for grabbing the mic before I forget. So, the issue is twofold, where trans people are pushed out of, are just simply pushed out of the major economy, and sex work is also sometimes a reality of for many trans people, and that's that. Where just as in the society itself right now, we are just not, our existence is not recognized, and we are discriminated on every single level of our interaction with the system. Of course, sex work is that is part of that's part of like trans experience, and so there could that be, and it's not only a trans experience. Like sex work is there are multiple layers where I am not qualified to speak on that subject, but there are two layers. There is one which is sex work, and there is another part of it is like human trafficking. And so, like just to assume that it is human trafficking, that might be simplifying the issue too much. And so one has to start from a place of decriminalizing sex work.
I can speak on that a little bit. The legal terms and all that blase, I don't have. That's not my lane. But I can speak on the situations of how houses work within our own community and how sex work is survival tactics for youth, especially trans women of color. When they're getting kicked out of homes at a rapid rate, they have no other choice but to have survival sex to make sure they're able to eat, live, and have spaces. I know a lot of sex workers that are youth has houses. A lot of people don't, when I talk about houses, I mean trans family or LGBT family that they live with. It could be 20 people living in one home. And everyone has their section of work of what they do and how they do to survive, and they survive together. And that's what I talk about when I talk about houses. In most cases, when you see youth actually doing sex work, to survive in that particular moment and to work in a house, you have to bring some kind of income in. And that's the main voyage of what they can do is sex work, because getting kicked out of the home at 15 years old, you can't bring nothing but yourself and body to a house, right? But you have to bring something to the table to survive. And that's one of the motions that they're able to either survive and also help with their transition, because no one else in the house is able to help you with your transition in them particular moments. That's one aspect. And a lot of people think that it is trafficking when it's not connected to that. It's actually connected to survival. And a lot of people don't want to think on survival. They want to think on another, it's capitalism. There we go. So yeah, you can give another mark to it. They connect that motion to capitalism. They draw them to jail. The state makes more money. So there we go. And that's how it really works when it isn't how it works within our community. That's pretty much.
And just to add one more thing would be like, if the obvious question, if one is thinking that, if suppose we have a trans youth, why don't they just go to homeless shelter or seek out social services and get assistance that way? One, like, let's be real, it's not as if social services, even like just starting out, it's easy to get, and that's just not for anyone to begin with. So from that starting point, for the trans youth, once again, the entire system is extremely gendered and binary, so their existence again does not get recognized. Homeless shelters are also sex segregated, so yes, trans people have difficulty getting placement.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors that contribute to the overpolicing and discriminatory police actions with trans folks. Economics. I'm so glad you said the C word. Thank you. So we're gonna I have one more question, then we're gonna wrap up and go to a Q&A. But I just wanted to go to my favorite part of doing the Know Your Rights work, which is not talking to cops. Protecting that right to not speak. There's a specific phrasing that we train people to use, which is "I will not talk, I want my lawyer." It's been demonstrated that that phrasing has worked in court just do the thing, to just get you out, get you off. Now, the thing about it for trans folks is that for many of the rights throughout the process of being arrested, you have the right to have an officer of the same gender there when you are searched, and when you are transported, you have the right to be transported by yourself rather than with someone of whichever gender in the car with you. There are a lot of rights that the way they're phrased in the directives, you have to request it. It says upon request. And even after you've requested it, it's if practical. You know, it will be provided. So there are a lot of places where simply not speaking is a little more difficult. They have to speak. They are forced to speak by the directives if they want to be treated with respect. Whereas like for the rest of the society, you know, you can just kind of just say your name and date of birth and sit there or just stare at a wall. So I guess I would ask, first of all, about what does it look like to protect your right to silence when you have to break the silence, like re-invoking and stuff like that, and anything else that pops to mind that could make this more difficult or more complicated for gender nonconforming individuals. And I'm gonna ask Simone because she.
Okay. So I'm just going to reiterate, the Know Your Rights training is to build a case later. It's not to stop the police from whatever they're doing. You always want to say, I will not talk on a lawyer, because you have a right to a lawyer. They're supposed to talk to your lawyer, not to you. And at the same time, you hold the remote. You are in control of the whole situation. So when you are stopped by police or you're even interrogated in an interrogation room at a police station, you hold the remote. You decide when you're going to talk and when you're not going to talk. I can't speak on the experience of gender nonconforming individuals, and you have to do whatever makes you feel the safest, but I can just tell you what the law provides, and you always have a right to remain silent, and you should use it.
Thank you.
So everything that Simone just said, and yes, I thank you for this question. And once again, I don't mean to keep on bringing up all the issues that we have and how everything is problematic, but once again, this is an example of how our rights are basically washed away. Either they are non-existent, and the very little rights that do exist, they are washed away by being forced to give them up. You are absolutely right. Like there is to maintain. One has to invoke that right, and if you are speaking, you are giving away the right to remain silent. And so, absolutely, the directive is the way things are, they are not right, and that needs to change, basically. And in terms of the way it should be is whatever, like gender, this is safety. Safety is, there are, for trans community and trans experience, there are two parts. There is the basic dignity and respect, and then there is safety. And both goes hand in hand. And trans people know how to keep themselves safe.
Word, absolutely. All right, well, I just want to thank all the panelists, and then they're passing out, folks are passing out cards and pens if you have a question. And you know what, I'll pass it to Christina.
All right, so now we have one of our staff attorneys, Larry, to come have a moment to speak to you about his work here.
Thank you. I would like to apologize for hit the road jack. I lost my mind for a minute. But I'm going to start this talk with, I'm going to try to keep this brief. We have to understand the environment that we're working in here. In America, and maybe other parts of the world as well, sex is a very difficult topic sometimes to deal with. A lot of the police officers that you encounter, they don't know a lot about sex. They use these badges to bolster their masculinity. And they use it to hide what they don't know, often, not always, what they don't know about sex. And when the issue of sex comes up, they actually become curious. They become more curious to be involved in that investigation, especially of a trans person, than anybody else, because this might contribute to their education. And they can be voyeuristic. I mean, and that part, in part goes to some of the treatment that black men get. When you talk about the Burge era and officers touching black men, that's part of that overall education that they just haven't gotten. So now, having said that, I will say this. I had an opportunity to go to the 1st District and represent a young woman that was trans. And it was an experience that I was not expecting to have, and I wasn't quite prepared for how to deal with it because I didn't know she was trans when I went in there. And the attitude of the police officers that I encountered was, it's hard to explain, but they were wondering when I walked in, what are you doing representing this person? And so I have to defend my client, not only as a client, but I have to defend the choices this woman has decided to make with her life. And as lawyers, we have to be prepared to do that, because we can't give any kind of a signal to the police that anything like, yeah, she's my client, but I understand this is kind of an awkward situation. You can't do that. You have to be straight up and tell them flat out, this is my client, she is a woman, and you have got to deal with her on those terms. And I'm not going to budge an inch from that. And that will change their attitude. She had some issues because the reason they picked her up is because she had apparently in her past some kind of a sexual violation, something she was supposed to register as a sex offender. And and apparently you register in the town where you live. She was in Chicago, but she lived out in the south suburbs. I think it was Robbins, I don't remember. And she had registered in the town where she lived. But the records in Chicago had not been updated. And so, to begin with, there's this disconnect between where she was registered and where the police thought she should have registered. And she's telling them, I'm registered where I live, I'm registered where I live, but they wouldn't believe her. They go by their records and their records are wrong. So I'm in the conference room with her, and she's having issues. And I don't know if these issues, she had issues dealing with, she wanted to hurt herself because she was having difficulty dealing with the situation that she was in. And when I explained to her, I can't fix the fact that they don't know where you are registered. Their records are messed up, and I can't fix that. The only thing I can do is try to protect you as best I can here in this police station to help you keep your mouth closed so that they will not question you without me being present. That's about the extent of what I can do. But she wanted to get when I explained to her that I couldn't fix the issue that was bothering her most, the other issue that she had came into play. And she said she wanted to hurt herself. And that became an additional issue that I had to try to deal with. And so, she literally began looking around this little cubicle she's sitting in for something to cut herself with. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? I can't help her over there. I couldn't hug her because there's this big glass wall between us. And so I go out and tell the police officer, the desk officer, This woman is having a meltdown. She needs to go to a hospital right now to get her meds, because that was one of the other things. She didn't have her meds. They weren't giving her meds. And the police officers, it was like, you know, well, we have to think about that. We have to decide how we're going to handle this. And I'm telling them, she's literally having a problem in here. And if you don't do something, she's going to damage something. It's going to be her. I mean, she might start banging her head against the wall. I don't know what she's going to do, but you've got to do something. And it was like moving through water very slowly. You know, it's like, well, we'll have to see how we can handle that. The bottom line, though, is this. Police officers, they don't think for themselves. They're not allowed to. It's in the book. If it's not written down, they won't know how to handle it. And so I think that they didn't know, this woman didn't know how to handle the situation of a woman in the conference room not being able to deal with the fact that the police had fucked her life up. And they were continuing to fuck it up by just doing tonight what they were doing. So I'm saying all that to say, this is a very complex issue, and granted, yes, trans people have a tougher road to hoe than the rest of us, but you have to be prepared for that. And it's like it's been said here more than once, you have to do whatever it is that you need to do to protect yourself and make yourself feel safe and comfortable. Now, having said that, everything you do to make yourself feel safe and comfortable might be inadequate. It might be inadequate. But that holds true for the rest of us as well. I mean, I walk around with ID all the time because I know I can get picked up at any time. Is that enough? Well, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I have the advantage of being a senior, so they cut me a little bit of slack, but not a whole lot, because we're still dangerous, even being old. So that's basically it. That was my experience. I had her exercise her right to remain silent, blah blah blah. You know, the whole sheet. But it was an eye opener for me, and I'm sharing it tonight to let you know this is what we have to deal with. And we have to be vigilant, we have to persevere, and in the end, we're going to win this. Thank you.
I just want to give a little pushback on that. I'm listening to what you're saying about police officers not knowing about sex, and which they do. I know a lot of girls out there that date a lot of police officers that give them a lot of coin. That's the part that I was listening to and just like, okay, I think everyone knows about the bees and the honey, whatever that looks like. But there's a lot of police officers. I used to date a police officer back in my younger days. So I'm just like, they know, they just don't want to enforce it. And it's a big difference between knowing and enforcing it, because they're trying to make sure that their homeboys see how tough they are, right? And the power structure behind it. I just want to bring that to relevance of that forefront. That's the only part. But everything else is perfect. Okay.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for your advocacy. And I would add that in terms of when we are talking about education and whether law enforcement knows or not, up until 2011, there were, let's one step back. At one point, every single state in the country had anti-cross-dressing and anti-sodomy laws, and the last law that was taken off the book was in 2011 in New York. So that is a myth to think that like the trans community it's new, or like that there is not knowledge. Rather, there is more than enough knowledge. That is just I don't know why people discriminate the way they do. And second thing, in terms of education, it is the job of like law enforcement is meant to keep the community safe, and so it is their job to keep themselves educated. It is not the job of trans people and their bodies like to be examined, and neither too, once again, like during when we were talking about the Burj era, like that, it was not part of, it was not the black man's duty to, whatever that means, let someone become educated about their body. But so that's one thing. And as lawyers, as a lawyer myself, I would challenge our, I would urge our community, the legal community, to be the gender warriors and protect our rights, including the right to privacy and a right to our medical information and our medical privacy. So we just, you treat people just like people, and sometimes terminology like that can, one can like get tripped up in terminology, or like is one like aware of the most, if they are up to date on everything. No one knows everything, and no one needs to know everything. It's very simple. Like, if you, first of all, trans people are just like people. We look like people. And if you become aware of someone's trans identity, and if your thought process changes, or if something, that thought comes, you stop yourself, and then you do what's opposite to that. And that could be a good gateway to stop oneself from discriminating. And there is also that part, that gender identity is a protected class in Illinois. And so we are not legally allowed to discriminate.
So in the state of Illinois, it is automatically, every police officer has to do a trans 101 once a year, every police officer. I'm helping the FBI in Illinois right now to update the trans 101 that they're already doing. So yes, so it's automatically set in stone that they have to do this. Number two, I believe that I am a unicorn. So I don't know if trans people are just people, but I'm a unicorn myself. I'm just, got good weave to cover all of it. But police officers in the state of Illinois has to do a trans 101 every year. And if it does not, that's probably logistics of the department itself.
Word. You always coming out with something, Messiah. You always up to something. Okay, so thank you. Actually, okay, so everything that just got covered in the past few minutes, and starting with what Larry was saying, brought up a couple more questions that I'd like to ask before we officially open the Q&A. First of all, meds. So when you're in the process of transition, there are things that you take. The police directives say that they cannot just assume that your syringes are for drugs if you tell them that they're for hormones or whatever. Else, you may be, whatever medical reason, especially if you're carrying a prescription with you. Just curious what happens if you don't have a prescription on you, but you've got your medical syringes, do the police? They're, what do they respond differently? Do they actually respect that?
Are you talking about during a stop or at the police station, during booking?
I was thinking of during a stop, but I'm not sure. Maybe both?
Not my personal experience, but from what I have heard, and from what we that yes, if one, even with prescription, there are issues, and oftentimes that could be construed as evidence of drug usage, and so that is definitely an issue. And yeah, so just because a policy states one thing doesn't mean that that is really followed. And in terms of, one also has to acknowledge that to come up when one's rights don't get respected, for a person to speak out against law enforcement and like put themselves at, open themselves up to that sort of scrutiny. That doesn't happen often, and there aren't, so yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I was just curious about that. Okay, so the last thing I want to ask, okay, what is one thing, this is for all the panelists, one thing that you would want a trans person to know before going into the police station after they've been arrested?
Go ahead.
I'd want them to know FDLA's number, which is 1-800-LAW-REP-4. It's 1-800-529-7374. You can call that number any time of day, any day of the week. On holidays, they will send someone out within the hour.
You have community here. You have collectives here that are always going to be behind you. You have organizations that will do whatever they can to possibly do to help you in there and also help you get out.
Do whatever you have to do to get about that situation alive. You're not meant to live your best life incarcerated anyway. There's no point to hit in that regard. Get up out of that jam.
Everything that was said, and do what feels good to you. Do what's safe. Do what feels good to you. Self-determination. And TJLP, we provide legal support to trans and gender non-conforming people, and if we are able to, we provide free legal support, and we are a collective of trans lawyers and social workers and organizers and attorneys, and so we try our best, and yes, you have community, we will find a way.
Word. And what's one thing you would want a lawyer to know before they walk into the jail to defend someone who is trans?
Your name and any aliases that you use.
Do I have to pay you?
I guess I should, like, what you would want a lawyer to take into, so you, like.
Do I have to pay you?
Okay, right, we ain't got money for that. Okay, good, thank you, yeah. All right, yeah.
You're defending a person with different life experiences, circumstances, and that's it. That's all. There's a person, and know that, and inform yourself and prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to defend them to the best of your ability, beyond even your own shortcomings.
Don't assume, ask. Name, pronoun, everything, ask. As an attorney, we are supposed to find out, and then follow and respect our clients' wishes. So that's that.
Awesome. Any final thoughts from the panel?
Thank you, FDLA. Thank you for inviting us and doing the important role of education. So.
Okay. Add this one? Start with the end with that one. Oh, sorry.
FDLA attorneys are free, so 24 hours a day, the attorney's going to come for free and represent you. Just to answer your question, always free. Sometimes we have people call the hotline and ask, nope, no money. Here you go.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got some questions from y'all. First of all, for the panel, do you think advocating for trans and GNC inclusive policies at the Chicago Police Department is helpful, short-term or long-term? And also a thank you with hearts for your labor today.
Okay, repeat that before.
Do you think advocating for inclusive policies, trans and gender nonconforming inclusive policies at Chicago Police Department is helpful?
So that is like an oxymoron question for me. It is like, no. Me personally, as a person that deals with on an equity level of economics and structural levels, especially dealing with the trans community, everyone has their lane, and that's cute if you want to do that. But how am my sisters, my brothers, and my siblings going to eat? How are they going to survive? Where the housing, where that structure is where I see most energy needs to be at.
There's a term in the organized community known as harm reduction. It has very limited value that's very situational and very contextualized, and it should not be expansive or expanded at any given time because scarcity is something that's enforced by capitalism and the colonial system, as Lasaya made very clear. So do what you can when you can. However, you should not be staying there for that long at all.
Resources need to be devoted to the community, towards education, and towards from us just simply surviving to us thriving, and that's where the resources need to be spent. And in terms of whether advocating for TIGN inclusive policies, is that like a good thing? Personally speaking, we just need to start out from a place of non-discrimination, and that's it. We don't need to, there is no recreating the wheel. We just need to stop discriminating, and then we won't need to spend resources in creating TIGN and inclusive policies, whatever that might be. Yeah. Yes.
Basically, we don't need rainbow painted bars. We don't need that. That's not the type of liberation. This not no HRC, a new wavy neoliberal progressive type of like way of continuing the colonial system of violence. Like we ain't looking for that. That's not what's hot. Like it's just really not it.
Okay. Do you have any?
Ditto.
All right, so next question. How can trans folks stay safe from police at protests and rallies?
Leave us the hell alone. Don't we have freedom of speech? Is it, or do white folks have freedom of speech? I want to be honest about that and be very vigilant about that. If I, as a black trans person, have to stay safe from police officers, why don't I have freedom of speech? Don't I have the right to protest? Or again, is it just for white folks to protest in these streets? Or is it when black or brown or any POC person speak about the issues of what's happening is always a problem. And especially within the black community. It's an issue when the black community has to speak up, but it's never an issue when the Asian community do the same thing. So if you want to talk about the nuance and relationships of that, we need to start with there first. Like, yeah, okay, the Asian community is able to speak about the issues that they're having with the police officers in their community, but when the black people do the same thing, it's a problem. You're making a noise. You're being disruptive. It's an issue. So let's be real about the conversation. It's not just that. It's about color when you don't want to see color.
As Lasai just made very clear, gender is racialized in this society. Everything from blackness being perceived as mostly masculine and experiencing what it means to be assigned male at birth and even having a beard and how that reads, to even black cisgender women being seen as being more masculine inherently, or the fear of emasculation of the cisgender black man is very much so racialized, and it's anchored in anti-blackness, as Lasaya was just pointed out. And I want to affirm what the labor you just did and put out there, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for saying that. And also, if you out there, come with a crew. Don't assume that people got you, because they don't know you in the sense in which they want to assume they know you, right? Like, people want to project this idea of like knowledge and familiarity and allyship, and like, no, we gang or we not, like, for real, that's it. That's all I gotta say.
Yes. Thank you, Lasaya. And yes, well, just as a Southeast Asian trans man, like who was born and brought up in India, and who then moved here. Yes, anti-blackness is, like, that issue is present even in brown communities. So, yes, and we are just, after this, I'm going to say no comments because, like, we are ending, and we would need to do But, and in terms of trans people and being in protest and such spaces, it's like, no, we exercise whatever legal rights we have. If there is the legal right to protest, then that applies to us too, and that's that. And as trans people, of course, we should always do what feels good to us and affirms us and feels safe.
We also need to bring in the realization, I really don't need this, I'm loud. Oh, it's all recording. Oh, okay, I need this. We also need to bring visualization that the community, when we talk about trans community, the privileges of what each trans person has, right? White trans people have a different privilege than black trans people, and we need to talk about that. And that's why I brought it into that deeper conversation of race within our community, because if we don't talk about that first, we can't get to the next level. That's it.
Thank you.
Liberalism and education privilege and trans misogyny and everything else.
Yes. Okay, so the next question, it's a two-parter. So I'll start with the first part. The right to respect pronouns within Chicago Police Department sounds like a new accomplishment, although a very small one. How did that come about, and what ways can community organizers continue to push for trans rights, such as, and that's the part two, because first I want to see, does anyone have any idea about how the process?
Yeah, we already answered that. The first question said that.
Oh, okay. So is there a process, then the next part, is there a process by which a trans person can file to transfer out of a prison filled with the sex they were assigned at birth?
In lockup, you can't just be like, oh, I don't want to be here, because nobody wants to be there. So you can't really choose like, oh, well, yeah, I don't really want to be around here. Yeah, everybody is in captivity, so you don't get to choose where you're going to go. All you can do is document, pay attention to your surroundings, pay attention to the abuses that are happening to you, and it's for documentation so you have a case later. It's not for when you're there.
It's just a new zoo.
Yeah.
And absolutely, and just to, yes, the policy, the way it exists right now, it does not affirm your gender, and you are, like, in terms of, like, wherever you are placed, and if that is not the place where you feel safe, like, and definitely talking about, like, everyone, including trans people, there is no one narrative of how, like, who a trans person is and how they look like. And so if they don't feel safe right now, there is no mechanism, but there absolutely should be. Safety is utmost.
Thank you. Yes, and that also highlights if I could just add, it really highlights the role of, like, having legal representatives there every step of the way to advocate for things like a safe bathroom. Even if you can't move your lockup, you can, that is something that you will need when you're in there, and it's hard to just ask for it, and so, with FDLA, getting the lawyers there for that first 72 hours before you're assigned a public defender really fills a major, major hole. Okay, so the next question. For a trans individual who wants to change their gender mark, but their birth state prohibits that, what process can they do to change that law?
So I don't know about the law aspect. So I will answer this part. Trans women have been able to seep through the system since the beginning of the time. I've done it. I'm going to tell my story. They can't catch me because I'm in Chicago now, whatever. So what it is that back in my day, in Tennessee, you're not able to change the gender marker unless you are legally have documentation signed by a doctor that you had sex operation done. And they have to call the doctor. So the girls all together said, okay, we need this change. We're getting harassed. Things are happening, da 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 da. So we were able to get quote unquote documents. I'm not going to put myself up on the records. Documents to actually take to the ID office, to get our new IDs, to get them changed. When they called the number, someone was gonna be there at the number. So we had the documents to be able to change our gender marker without having to worry about going through that whole process. But trans people have always been able to do this. I can just speak to the incidents with trans women, but I know trans women been fucking up the game since the beginning of time. But if I have to forge this, and this to make sure myself is safe and my sister is safe, I'm going to do this. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. If I have to sleep with that doctor to make sure I have to get this done, it will be done. And I will send my homegirl there to do the same thing. So it's always finding a loophole within the law system. But y'all can answer the law question.
So right now, talking about Illinois and Social Security Administration, like also federal level when we are specifically Social Security Administration and passport, there is no surgery requirement. To change one's gender marker on their passport or social security, with Social Security, one needs to get a letter from a doctor stating there is a doctor-patient relationship and the person has, there is very specific language and you can reach out, I will send you a template, but basically, yes, there is a doctor-patient relationship and the person is undergoing or has undergone gender-related treatment. And what that treatment is, that is not the state's business. And in terms of Illinois, when we are talking about DMV, one just needs something called a safe passage letter, which would be, that can be issued by a nurse, social worker, doctor, various other professionals, and so healthcare professionals, and basically stating the same that this person is whatever their gender is, and that's that. And so now it is, there is no surgery requirement in terms of birth certificate. Folks, recently HB 1785, it passed the Senate and it's in, now soon it will be in front of the governor's desk, so please reach out and show support. That is the Vital Records Act, which basically takes out the surgery requirement from the Illinois Vital Records Act, which controls regulations related to birth certificate.
Thank you. Okay, so just for clarification around HB 1785, so you would be able to change your mark without getting the surgery, you would just be
certification, basically that is taking out the surgery requirement, and so yes, one does not, basically then it would just be from, based on the doctor's certification. And there is no surgery.
That's beautiful. So that's an answer. Google that. Search.
And you can find more information on Illinois Safe School Alliance or Illinois Safe School Alliance. You can find more information on that and ECRU of Illinois and other advocacy organizations.
Excellent. Thank you. That's great. And it's a great lead into our last question. for everyone. What gives you hope that we will win?
I know everybody else's answer is going to be way better than mine, but I think spaces like this gives me hope that we will win. I think it's important to have these conversations. It doesn't have to be Pride Month to have these conversations. I think this should happen all the time, and I think we should stay educated and also support each other.